We'll get up for another round of deliberations and very interesting sessions coming your way. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I welcome all of you. And I'd like to request everyone entering inside the hall to please come forward, take your seats. All those who are also seated behind, you may please move forward and take your seats. It's a day 2 of deliberations. So let's fill up the hall. Let's fill it up with our energy and with all the curiosity that we're looking forward to for this day. I'm going to request everyone who's seated right behind, please move forward. Everyone, please move forward and take your seats. Thank you. All our guests entering inside the hall, I'm going to request you all to please move forward and take your seats.
The world today is changing fast. Yet some things prevail stronger than change. Wisdom prevails. Wisdom guides. It leads the way and shows what's right. Blessed by the wisdom of the ancient philosopher Chanakya. A strategist with a keen eye for defense. The Indian Army and Clause is back with its second edition of the Chanakya Defense Dialogue 2024. The inaugural 2023 edition united top minds from across the world, shedding light on AI, big data and beyond. We set the tone for India's defense leadership with Atmanirbharta as the mantra. In the journey of nation building, we see a common dream where growth is fueled through comprehensive security. A secure nation, a secure region, a secure world where peace reigns. The biggest defense leaders, strategists and think tanks assemble to strike a balance. Partnerships to technical know-how. Security, ecology, culture and more. Together, we strive to put India on the road to fulfilling its dreams of Viksit Bharat. The time has come for India to take its seat as the Vishwa Bandhu and give the world a safer, secure and stable identity. Chanakya Defense Dialogue 2024. Drivers in nation building. Fueling growth through comprehensive security.
Namaskar and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And welcome back to the day 2 of Chanakya Defence Dialogue 2024. On behalf of the Indian Army and Centre for Land Warfare Studies, I, Kavya Chavali, extend a warm welcome to all our guests and our esteemed leaders. In fact, we have the august presence of none other than Dr. S. Somnath, Chairman, ISRO. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us this morning. And we extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you as we come together at this conference that is filled with some of the brightest minds coming together to deliberate and highlight on the several aspects that are shaping the geopolitical landscape while focusing on environmental sustainability. In fact, day 1 introduced us to some of the powerful speakers as we indulged in some important data points driving the overall growth trajectory. We also had the presence of the Honorable Raksha Mantri, Shri Rajnath Singh, as he inaugurated the Green Initiative 1.0 and also the Digitization of Indian Army 1.0, while also laying the roadmap ahead. That being said, there's also a wonderful quote from the Chanakya Niti itself that goes by, "The fragrance of flowers spreads only in the direction of wind, but the goodness of a person, that spreads across all the directions." And the same applies to all our speakers who are coming here yesterday and today as they share their valid data points, as they share their insights. And we also notice how we have had some wonderful takeaways across these 2 days, which is why we take that trend forward and we'll march ahead as we invite our next set of speakers and as we indulge in our next set of sessions coming your way. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's only befitting that to set the tone for the day 2 of Chanakya Defence Dialogue 2024, may I please invite the Director General Clause, Lieutenant General Dushyant Singh, PVSM, AVSM, to please come on stage. And can we have a huge round of applause to please help me welcome on stage Lieutenant General Dushyant Singh.
Thank you, Kavya. Vice Chief of Army Staff, General N.S. Rajat Subramani, Chairman ISRO, Dr. S. Somnath, distinguished speakers from India and abroad, serving government functionaries, esteemed officers in uniform and out of uniform, members of the academia, security experts from think tanks, members of the industry, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. On behalf of the Chief of the Army Staff and the Vice Chief of the Army Staff, I extend a very warm welcome to each one of you on the day 2 of this seminar. As we continue discussing key issues related to national development, security and international relations, I trust that day 1 has provided us with valuable insights for reflection, appreciation and criticism. We humbly accept the appreciations and we assure you that we will strive to improve upon the criticism. So thank you very much for the day 1 lively participation to each one of you. But before I move ahead, let me recap some highlights from yesterday's event, especially for those who joined us today. Honorable Raksha Mantri, Shri Rajnath Singh ji, presented a vision combining economic growth with comprehensive security, reminding us that our nation's strength extends beyond military capabilities to include active participation of all citizens in our pursuit of prosperity. Some of the key takeaways from his talk, there were many, but I will just highlight a few of them. First, he spoke about the significance of the recent development which have taken place between India and China, and that it will have an underlying importance in the future course of relations between India and China. Hope that the trajectory is favorable to both. It's a win-win situation. Impact of defense on economic security largely is ignored was his telling statement. I think it's a good recognition of the reality of today. Defense spending can affect economic growth. That's what he said. Ironic that defense has not been recognized as a factor of economic growth. Then he spoke about something very interesting, and that was about colleges and universities must have more courses and programs on defense-related subjects. I think it's a good recognition coming from the right top man of our country, and it would be also beneficial for all those people who are coming from the universities like Amity, Jindal, and Delhi University, St. Stephen's College. I think there are a whole lot of people who are representing this particular, coming in this particular seminar. They will take this important feedback back to their institutions. He also spoke about how defense economy can actually boost incomes, create jobs, fostering research, enhancing resilience, as some of the outcomes of this particular initiative which we are taking, especially related to Atmanirbhar Bharat. Lastly, I think he closed his entire discussion with a very, very relevant statement, and he said, when India speaks of self-reliance, it does not imply being separated or from the global community. We are committed to collaborate with all nations to work together, not alienate, but partner in international efforts for an inclusive and equal world order. I think that was the final statement which he made and which caps his entire speech. Coming on to the Chief of Army Staff's address, in his speech, the Chief emphasized that security is not just the absence of conflict, but a driving force behind economic growth and social stability. His message highlighted that a secure environment enables us to realize our full potential and build a resilient nation. Some of the key takeaways from his talk were, basically he said that, the goal of any comprehensive security should be nation building, and that's absolutely true. And as part of that, he also highlighted the concept of Chanakya's 7 pillars, which are essentially Swami, the king, and in today's context, you can say the leadership, top leadership of the country. Amatya, ministers, self-explanatory. Janapada is country. Durg is fort capital, or you can say the sovereignty of our country, defense of our borders. Kosha, treasury, I think the most important thing. Yesterday, one of the speakers, I think it was Karis, who said, when it is defense, it is only money, money, and money. So I think that was a good take on how we should invest in our security. And he also, the next pillar was Dand. And Dand means either justice process or through force. Mitra was the last pillar enunciated by Chanakya, which means allies and friends. I think they are all relevant even today, and that is what the chief emphasized. He also emphasized that security does not mean only physical security, but also non-traditional aspects, as it was highlighted yesterday in our one of the sessions about sustainability of economic growth through environmental conservation, etc. Allow me to reflect a little bit on all the 3 sessions which were conducted yesterday. First session was, of course, on geopolitics, dynamics, navigating the international coalism, yielded several key takeaways. In fact, Palki Sharma highlighted a very, very important issue. She said, India's winning combination is a balance of mix of hard and soft power. If we have been able to reach a diplomatic agreement with China, it is underwritten by hard power on the borders and, of course, diplomacy. And she also talked about how diplomacy can be important and quoted the example of Maldives. It is there in front of us. Initially, we were not that well, pitched, especially after the election results. But thereafter, I think things have turned around our way. Lisa Curtis addressing her, she said that for the U.S., China remains as challenge number 1. And I think China will be a challenge for most of the nations today. So therefore, we have to tread that path very carefully. She said that India-China deal is a testament to patience of India and will probably show a new face of cooperation. Palki highlighted something very interesting. She said that way forward as far as foreign diplomacy is concerned, many-lateral collaborations are likely to pay much better dividends than large forums. Coming on to Mr. Asanga, he spoke about friendly neighborhood and economic growth as a key for nation. Access to resources, equality important along with self-sufficiency in food, energy and security. Karis spoke about global governance and reform of institutions as very important. In fact, she pitched very strongly for India to be part of the UN permanent seat and also with a veto. So I think, thank you, Karis, if you are here. Otherwise, this is a good support coming from a friendly country. Ambassador Kamal Sibbal talked about Russia-Ukraine war and its impact, stating very clearly that the space for conventional war still exists. Thereafter, he spoke about continued partnerships to build deterrence. Problem of China was also highlighted in the sense that West was declared as having cultivated China initially. So they gave a reason that no, it was with the aim that over a period of time China will convert into democracy. Thereafter, Mr. Reddy had spoken about Atmanirbhar Bharat and the need for making Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative sustainable. Sanjeev Sanyal spoke about making shipping as a part of infrastructure. Building ships is one thing which he gave out very clearly as a message. Shipbuilding is India is way behind, although being third in the going to be the third largest economy soon. We just have 1% share in the shipbuilding. This final session was about climate change. It goes without saying. India faces that was an interesting fact. India faces one disaster every month, and I think we need to take serious note of this particular issue. So as we shift today into the discussions, we are lining up a great lineup of sessions. The first one would be, of course, dealing with internal security, social cohesion. We have Dr. Trivedi, we have General V.K. Singh, and Dr. Meenakshi Lekhi talking about it. Then we have the next session about technology. General Raj Shukla would be steering that particular discussion. And the last would be the discussion related to land warfare, which is our core bread and butter subject. So with that, I come to the end of my opening remarks. But before I end my remarks, I would like to just take 1 minute to explain to you why we presented the painting yesterday to Dr. Rajnath Singh. What is the significance of this painting? If you look at this painting, it is reimagination of Nalanda from the ruins. That means there is an artist, Mr. Renger, who actually imagined how Nalanda would look at that point in time in history. And each of the creative work signifies something. For example, the large brick structure signifies ancient universities building. Thereafter, the multi-tiered design reflects the monumental center of education, Nalanda. Warm, earthy tones, red, orange, for example, of the bricks signify strength and endurance, contrasted by greenery, which symbolizes harmony between knowledge and nature. Scale and intricacy of the architecture invites viewers to a journey of intellectual exploration, and pathways, the various paths leading to this particular building actually identify the various streams which are converging into Nalanda. And finally, water suggests continuous flow of wisdom with Nalanda as the fountainhead. With that, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and wish you all a very, very happy learning and education process in day 2 of the seminar. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for truly setting the tone. In fact, thank you for sharing those important nuggets of observations from day 1, because that allows us to set the tone for day 2 of the Chanakya Defense Dialogue 2024. Well, that being said, this morning we have the presence of a distinguished figure in space technology and systems engineering who comes with a career spanning over 38 years. In fact, his leadership has seen major achievements such as the successful Chandrayaan-3 lunar landing and the launch of missions like Aditya L1 and INSAT 3DS. He's also spearheaded the national space policy and the engagement of ISRO with new space enterprises and startups. In fact, his work also includes the development of small satellite launch vehicles and the reusable launch vehicle. And he also plays a pivotal role in the Gaganyaan program, which aims to send Indians to space. You know, there's a wonderful saying that space is an inspirational concept that allows us to dream big. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a big round of applause. Please help me welcome Dr. S. Somnath, Chairman, ISRO. So if I may please invite you on the stage to please share your valuable thoughts with the gathering.
Good morning, all of you. Can I have okay. Good morning once again. Thank you so much for giving an opportunity to come over and then talk a bit on the space domain. But then the subject is space situational awareness, not really into space technology of building, launching satellites into space. So I hope that I have almost 30 minutes to speak about it. So I'll try to contain within that. This domain has become very important in the recent times. As you know, when we started launching our early rockets, we never ever bothered about the launch timing setting, looking at the satellites in orbit, whether there will be any possibility of any collision of our rocket with the satellites. But of late, now every time that we set for a launch, it becomes so important for us to look at whether there is some satellite on our path of launch. And many a times that we are asked to shift it by a few seconds. I think that is good enough. Even a few seconds are good enough to ensure that we don't cause any harm to any passing satellite by that time when the rocket reaches a place. I think many a times we don't even realize that this is becoming such a crowded place. And the issue of space situational awareness, to know about what is happening up there, becomes very, very important for all of us. So for you, let me tell you that it is not into a policy that I am discussing, but more of the issue of the crowding of the space and the corresponding challenges that are faced for us is something that I would like to discuss today. But before I start, I think we need to understand the type of spacecrafts that we are launching. In 1960 time, there were nothing in space, but today there are lakhs of objects in space. And these are happening because that we launch many times of spacecrafts into space for communication purpose, Earth observation, navigation, space science, and many other activities that are happening there. And many a times this domain is changing so much and the technology is evolving, especially in the domain of communication. We have traditionally the geo orbits being used, which is a very precious place for us to have stationary satellites, where we have been traditionally launching, but later the constellation that are come in LEO, MEO has disrupted the entire communication system, and new demand for direct-to-mobile communication is happening. If you look at the Earth observation, there are plenty of satellites launched by many people, especially those who are friendly, not so friendly to us, have been launching hundreds of them. And the technology itself is changing, the resolution is improving, the spectral qualities are improving over a period of time. Large, small, medium-sized satellites are launched in various shapes and forms. The global positioning services, positioning, navigation, timing services, are an equally important domain. GPS is well known, and many other constellations have come up in various orbits. And we also have our own, which is more of a regional constellation, the NAVIC, which is geostationary right now, and we have a plan to expand it with its MEO-LEO constellation. Equally important are the scientific missions which are sent to space, because space is a vantage point for us to look into various astronomical observations. So we have been launching the Chandrayaan. In this path, it goes through the Earth atmosphere, Earth space, as well as then move over to other planetary spaces. So we have quite large number of satellites coming up. So before I look at the type of objects in space, let us look at just a domain of communication. A lot of changes are happening in this domain, especially with regard to the type of technology that is coming into space communication infrastructure. High throughput becomes very important. Earlier we used to talk about transponders. They are no longer the terminology used. Now direct mobility becomes very important domain. And also we see that earlier we used to build satellites for 15 years, 20 years of lifetime. Today we see that the technology is changing too fast, and we need to look at how we can have more flexible satellites that will adapt to market demands. And the technology itself is now living only for short duration, like 3 to 5 years. And also new bands are coming, and because of the crowding of the infrastructure, the frequencies and new bands are getting qualified and also going into optical domain. Again, quantum. As communication programs are coming up, we also are going to build a set of satellites to do study on this quantum key distribution for securing communication. Now look at the operational hazards that are placed in front of us with this number of satellites. And there are many elements that goes into creating issues, especially of the congestion that we are talking about. They are natural. Of course, there are a lot of objects coming from space and creating as debris in space. It comes out of space weather activities. Also the meteorites and asteroids that will come and occupy transitional space in the orbits. They could be in very eccentric orbits and more stable orbits sometimes. And there are objects that are coming due to the collision between various objects, could be upper stages of rockets, satellites, and also due to self-fragmentation. I think you would have heard about a fragmentation that happened just recently. Large number of fragments are generated. And then there are intentional activities which generates a lot of fragments and could be due to jamming, could be due to anti-satellite activities, maneuvering, as well as weapon activities that could create more of this. So all this would add fragments and particles with various nature. All of them don't possess a uniform nature. It's not like a traffic on the road where most of the velocities are very nearby. But here the issue is that they have varied type of velocities that could vary from about 7 to 8 kilometers per second, maybe up to 20, 25, 30 kilometers per second speed. And they will be in various orientations and directions, which is a very big challenge for us to look at how to handle them becomes very important. And especially natural objects have very high energy associated with them. So this is one of the challenge with us. If you really look at the population increase of this debris in space, really astonishing to look at the numbers. I think many people don't even realize that the danger that they really possess. But even after having all these numbers in space, we still feel secure and safe because the space is so vast and the probability of encountering one piece on your journey through space is so less. So they are normally talked in terms of 10 to the power of minus 5, 6, etc. So it looks like that we have a lot of space still around. But then, about the Kessler syndrome, some of you may be knowing that if you really have a collision which has a cascading effect and within no time that you can have a huge amount of population of debris which could become such a crowded place that future space exploration can really hamper for years together until it is cleaned up over a period of time through natural decay. So you can see over the years the number of fragmentation, number of debris have been increasing substantially. For us, the major challenge here is observability. If you want to look at objects in space, how to see them, especially materials which are very small in size, say be like 1 millimeters, etc., can never be seen by any technology that we have at this moment. And even 1 millimeter size object could be very dangerous once they have a velocities like 8 to 10 kilometers per second. If a paint flake passes through you, you are dead. No, they will pierce through you. It could be only a paint, but then it can be equally dangerous because paints are anyway produced because many of the satellites and objects in space shed them over a period of time. There is a material decay happening, even natural processes. So if you look at the numbers, you will see the number of sizes objects in about 10 centimeter and 1 millimeter to 1 centimeter size are in huge numbers. And this is a major challenge for us on how to catalog them, how to look at them, how to protect against them. For example, if you look at humans' habitat that is to be created in space, this becomes a major challenge, how to protect against such debris, especially the one which is slightly bigger, like of the order of 1 centimeter. They cannot be handled by any debris type of shielding, and they cannot be even observed also. So they becomes a potentially big danger for all of us. Now, observation of these objects in space is a major challenge, which I mentioned earlier. The class of the sizes which is from up to 10 centimeter becomes very, very dangerous because they are not observable and they can be very catastrophic. But of course, beyond that could be seen by the current technologies in some way or the other. So through various means they can be seen. So through base sensors or in situ measurements in orbit or regular tracking can give you some observation. So, and of course we need to catalog them, maintain them and observe them continuously because they don't remain in same orbit and they are subject to perturbations of various nature due to the natural forces and other activities. So this is a major challenge for the community now. Today the numbers are so huge and observation of them requires a collective effort world over. Now look at the space situational awareness. The terminology that we have been using is a comprehensive knowledge and understanding of the continued awareness of the current status and future evolution of space objects and space environment. So here we need a very safer, more efficient, sustainable operation outer space for all the objects in the space. So the activities which will involve tracking of them, characterization of this. Characterization means the size characterization, the direction, possible evolution, and then its impact on these objects due to space weather, and predicting the threats and risk management when new objects come into more and more into space. So when you look at the activities that we have in Department of Space and ISRO, we aim at safeguarding the Indian space assets, which is we have almost 52 plus spacecrafts in orbit, and then containing the proliferation of this space debris for a long time, which includes observation capabilities, mathematical capabilities in terms of programming, and also looking at this evolution over a period of time with great accuracy, and then looking at solutions to mitigate the problem. So these issues are being discussed in various international forum like Interagency for Space Debris Coordination Committee, which we have hosted recently in Bangalore. It's one of the 42nd meeting was hosted here. International Astronomy, IAA Space Debris Committee, we are part of it. Similarly, IAF, International Astronautical Federation Space Traffic Management Committee, we are part of it, as also ISO Working Group 7. All these fora discuss these issues, technologies, its mitigation, and various activities are discussed in such fora. In ISRO, we have created a laboratory called IS4OM, which is going to be our center for looking at all these issues, which looks at collecting this data related to these objects, then mathematical formulation, and also the programs that are related to propagation studies, collision studies, and also sharing this data across various other stakeholders in this country as well as abroad. So we conduct a lot of R&D as well as capability development, including observational capability development in the future. So this is one of the major work which we started just a few years back. But the infrastructure that we have is not huge at this moment. We do not have a large amount of observational capability at this moment, and we are trying to look at how we can enhance it over a period of time through various instruments that I will speak about a little later, whether they are radars or optical observations or other space-based observations. But right now we are focusing on the type of capability that we have in terms of predicting and then work with other stakeholders in the world to show that we have an equally strong capability in terms of mathematically formulating the further journey of objects once we have a data about them, or for their ephemeris data, the orbital data. And then we do campaigns along with other people across the world to see that our predicting capabilities are extremely good compared to others. That's a very important domain that we work. And for sensors, then we talk about space situational awareness. To know about them, there are various technologies. I think many of you may be knowing about the radars, but then radars become very, very complex and costly, and the ability to detect objects which are moving at tremendous speeds and look at hundreds of them, especially with radar cross-section being very, very small, like 10 centimeters, it becomes extremely difficult to characterize them. And similarly, another observation capability is optical. Optical was never been in the fray for some time in the past, but today the technology has been very, very good. Some of the optical observations across the world are really producing fantastic results. I'll show you some of them now in the future. And especially it is very good for geo, where the movement of the satellite is not very fast and you can focus on it and then get good images. And similarly, you can look at radio telescopes, you can look at signal characterization either through reflection or through radio frequency things, or you can use lasers, lidars, and also you can use space-based observations to look at objects and characterize them based on one satellite observing another satellite. So these are type of observational capability through sensors that we can create. Some of the Indian companies, especially in the private domain, are coming out with ideas where with that they can observe space debris and characterize them. So I'll just show you some of the data which related to optical observations, a neuromorphic camera which has really produced fantastic results on some of the spacecrafts. Though it doesn't give you the physical characteristic of the observation, but through training, especially with the artificial intelligence, etc. coming in, we should be in a position to understand what type of objects are, what type of movements are taking place. Not just as a point mass, you can actually observe its physical shapes, orientation, attitude, etc. can be detected. And even anything happening to that also can be seen by this type of cameras. These are very long distance cameras which are tracking objects at tremendous speeds. I think you need to understand that. And they are it can be driven very automatically and at very high frame rates. So with a collection of observation platforms across geographically separate location, you should be in a position to characterize its orbital characteristics very well and come to know about how you can handle later. One of the important tasks that we are doing, not ISRO alone, but most of the satellite operators doing, are called conjunction assessment and collision avoidance. This is primarily one of the important tasks that all of us need to continuously do, because another object comes very nearby. When you talk about nearness, is actually very relative. They could be not a few meters, but they could be a few kilometers, because the ability to estimate the positions very accurately depends on the fidelity of the mathematical models and also the observation, characterization, etc. So when you talk about coming closer, is sometimes in terms of kilometers, and we put a boundary of them in terms of a spheroid, and then say, okay, two objects are likely to collide at this point in time, and we need to take an action to mitigate that issue. So we do normally, such studies are done for a few days ahead of such an event, and then look at how it's evolving over a period of time, and whether risk is becoming higher or more, and take an action to do a collision avoidance maneuver, which includes changing the direction or the velocity of this object in a manner that will be most fuel efficient, because the fuel is a precious commodity on board the satellite. You can't just like that fire and move it away. So we need to preserve it over long periods of time, and very efficient collision avoidance maneuvers have to be done. And this is again a mathematical programming activity. And we need to see after operating it how it has moved, and then make a further prediction. So I can tell you that in the last year itself, we had to do almost 100 such maneuvers to protect our just 52 satellites. So you can think about when it has to be done for thousands of satellites in constellations, how complex it will be, and whether it will be possible humanly to do it in terms of by programs or manual. So we need to hand over the whole task to computers, and it has to be done automatically. I think this is also coming into this system. Now, another major activity that we need to do is in looking at how launches have to take place, when rockets launches are going to do, and they pass through the orbits of some of the satellites. Some of them are launched just at the lower LEO orbit, but sometimes it crosses many of the orbits and then go to higher orbits. At that time, thousands of satellites could pass that time, and we need to make sure that the rocket that is going through that doesn't cause collision or even contamination of any of those satellites. So we need to check the path. And rockets also has a problem. They are not deterministic. They are also probabilistic. Sometimes their performance will change, and the time in which it reached that point also could be different due to certain performance degradations of the stages. So we need to do a mathematically statistical analysis to see what is the likelihood that we can have a collision, and then make a change in the trajectory such a manner that we can pass through. So we create windows in seconds, and then see what is the time of liftoff, so as to match that it will pass through very safely through certain path in the orbit. So if it's a very complex mathematical calculation, we do it regularly for every launch to make sure that no possibility of a collision exists while a satellite is launched. Equally complex problem is in Moon and Mars. So you thought that only Earth is crowded with all the satellites, but the reality is that even Moon and Mars is getting crowded now. You look at the number of satellites around Mars and Moon. Now, even on Moon, we had such an issue in the recent times with one of the satellites from Korean satellite was having very close proximity with our Chandrayaan-2 satellite, and we need to do some maneuvers to make sure they don't collide each other. You can understand that even with the less number of satellites that we have a problem on Moon right away, and it's going to increase. I think many more satellites are going to come up in the Moon orbits, and the days to come. Moon is much more complex than Earth because of the nature of the orbits are in Moon are not like that is in Earth, not as predictable as Moon, because the geoid, or rather the gravity field of Moon is slightly not uniform like that of Earth, and the orbits also change in height substantially with the time in orbit. It's not like a circle exactly that it moves. So we need to make exceedingly good models of the movement of objects in orbits like this, and then make exact predictions. So it becomes huge mathematical challenge, and also need large amount of observation in the days to come to handle complex movement. And another problem with this is that it's far away. The Moon orbits or Mars orbits are far away, and predicting it accurately and knowing it accurately through ground measurements on Earth is also challenging. The accuracy by which they can be predicted is also very, very poor. In comparison to that you can do on Earth. So it becomes another complex problem in handling space situational awareness on Moon and Mars. Another risk that is emerging in this domain is the re-entry of objects from space. Ultimately, all these satellites, lakhs of them, will come back to Earth. Not today, maybe after 10 years, 25 years, 30 years, 100 years. They are all going to come back to Earth. But this coming back to Earth is over a period of time, and over a decade happens, and it will fall on oceans or land masses. But most of the good part is that Earth is covered by large part is ocean. So the impact of these objects are happening on over ocean, but it can also cause land impact. Recent times that we had many rocket parts of other nations falling in our landmass, and we have been going and collecting them. And this, luckily, it has not caused any human death or any other serious casualty. But this becomes very important. Many a times it doesn't become very controlled re-entry. And if our objects cause damage to others, it becomes a liability issue. And this has forced us to look at how we can handle such issues through active debris removal or do directed re-entry point in such cases. And we are looking at how to model them properly. For example, our predictability of re-entry of these objects into one specific location is also poor because of the effect of atmosphere. And many a times these objects have different shapes, and the way in which it will interact with atmosphere and the drag and thereof could also be different. So our ability to predict exact impact point is also not very good. So these are the challenges. And we also have issues like the inspector satellites, where people do malicious activities in orbits, and they send another satellite to look at our satellites, and then we also see signatures of such activities in space, and we need to continuously observe whether such malicious activities do take place. So these issues are becoming new and emerging risks in this domain. So we talk about the interdependency of space situational awareness, space traffic management, and space domain awareness, which is graphically shown here. Various elements of it. So space domain awareness is something which is of higher nature, and space traffic management is one of the operational activity that we need to do in terms of managing all of these satellites in space. So various actors coming into this, the civilian ones like us in space who are interested in maintaining observation and collaboration, but there are activities which are more of military in nature, whether there are malicious activity that takes place around us, and how to protect our space assets against adversaries becomes very important. Now, this process of doing space situational awareness framework is starting from observations. Unless you have strong observational capability, there is no point in working in space situational awareness. You will be dependent on someone who will provide you a set of orbital data, and you believe that that is correct, and you propagate beyond it, and then ensure that you are protected. But it may not be true all the time. So this becomes very important for every sovereign nation to put up its own share of observational capability, which is something very important for us to work on. I can tell you that we have not yet reached a level of self-sufficiency. Our ability to observe satellites has not been great, but we get a lot of collaborative work and data from various sources, and we have perfected our mathematical and predictional capability, but we need to improve on the observational capability. I don't go into the flowchart at this moment. The new challenges that are coming in front are on account of the large constellations. I think this was not a case in the past, when much before the Elon Musk came in and started launching his Starlink satellites, where 5,000 of them are launched and new constellations are going to come up. And we can't stop it because space is for everybody, and new applications come, and it actually improves our access to space, and new applications do come in. But you look at the number of satellites that are getting launched. They are in thousands, and they are not in orbits that are in a low orbit. And if you really look at using an optical telescope which used to watch planets, now you will see a lot of light streaks because hundreds of them pass through that, and many of the Earth-based observations becomes very extremely difficult. And it becomes too crowded. Even to make a launch to a satellite rocket to pass through, it becomes very, very difficult, and it becomes really crowded. And it's only going to increase. The type of predictions that we are happening is also in the future, number of satellites that are going to be launched into the constellations are also going to increase. So we have a terminology called dark and quiet sky, and this is becoming a very important topic of discussion in international domain. How to create dark and quiet sky to enable Earth-based observations. So there are discussions happening how to control the number of low Earth orbiting satellites, and also the issues related to interferences related to frequency and its management. and its interferences with the various observations like radio astronomy. So this becomes very important topic of international engagement and discussion. Of course, very important topic is the space cyber security. When you talk about space situational awareness, you can't avoid this. And this comes in the form of unauthorized access to some of the assets that we have in various phases of operation. And also potential jamming, spoofing, interception of communication all becomes very important. And we need to protect against all of this, which includes how do we implement protective measures and how do we maintain vigilance over various activities that are taking place. How do you really encrypt the communication infrastructure, key change, physical diversity to protect against in case of situations. Similarly, identification of vulnerabilities in various forms, which includes terrestrial networks, intrusion into the ground infrastructure of commanding, and also identify threats and then recover in case of any such actions are taken. So we need to create a proper cyber critical space management, crisis management plan to protect against many of the activities in space while we work on space situational awareness. A new terminology where we discuss these topics is called long-term sustainability of outer space activities. These are being discussed in various international fora. LTS is a very topic which is discussing in UN COPOS, where India is also elected as a chair of the working group on long-term sustainability outer space for last 2 years. They will continue to be the chair for next 2 years also, where we look at how to discuss the space to become a safe place for all of us to work together. So this is a major topic and many contributions are done from Indian side. Another important activity that we have taken up is to make a debris-free space mission as a declaration. And this has been declared in the last 42nd IADC meeting. And we made sure that this topic is taken up by every nation as an important commitment so that we don't actually really clutter the space and we take actions. When a satellite becomes defunct, we'll be voluntarily deorbiting it. We will make sure that satellites do not explode. And all the upper stages of orbits of the rockets after launching will be depressurized or deactivated from active elements so that it doesn't contaminate in terms of creation of more debris. So it is more of a self-disciplined governance on how to minimize the threat on account of various activities. So this is one of the DFSM is a terminology that we have coined, and this we would like to many nations to adopt, and we have put it in front of most of the international fora. And this is the type of infrastructure that we have today. I already described, so I will not explain further. I'll tell you, we need huge infrastructure. I'll tell you one example of a study that is run recently. I'll come back to a little later. The current requirements are that we need to have monitoring of most of the overflighting satellites. We need to have line of sight visibility for most of the activities that are taking place. And also to create a constant vigilance and surveillance, creating advanced sensor arrays, autonomous on-orbit detection and collision avoidance maneuvers, which has to be autonomous, not the current approaches. Intentional maneuver detection is very important because some of the satellites do move. We have indicated that there are some suspicious movements taking place to look at observations, and also to create AI-based techniques for predicting intentional maneuvers and then suspicious close approaches. So this becomes very important development task that we have initiated within the organization. One study we have done is if you have to really look at space domain awareness, we need huge amount of observational capability, not only in India but also across the world. They could be in the form of radars, optical observation capability, as well as other forms of observational capabilities. This includes not only the space but lower orbit detection capabilities as well. So, of course, this is one type of study. There could be other models which could be done by other agencies as well. So I don't go into details of this. Right now, the challenges and way forward is to create capabilities in this domain. I think I have made the statement of the problem very well. But then the type of strength that we have is more in terms of its prediction capability, modeling capability is extremely good with us. But what we lack today is the observational capability, which need to be built over a period of time. So the network of radars and optical observation capabilities are to be developed. And optical seems to be one of the very good capability that we ourselves have, and we need to create more of them in the coming days. because it is low cost and more autonomous in terms of capability. But then the challenge of tracking low Earth orbit, which are much more faster, low resident time objects to track becomes a challenge. I believe this technological challenge will be overcome in the days to come. And we need to put hundreds of them across country and across the world to really create a coordinated observations and sharing of the data to help us to strengthen this domain. But there are many challenges. I think these challenges are well known. I have already discussed. Now, not only this, I think new constellations are also coming up. I mentioned about the communication constellations and other Earth observation constellations, but new constellations are currently in discussion. One of them is the automatic dependent surveillance type of constellations, where we need to look at aircraft movement, ship movement, and many others. People are discussing building large constellations. Similarly, we are looking at constellations to look at various other Earth-based observations, and number of satellites in these constellations could be at various levels and orbits. So we will see in the coming days not just communication, Earth observation constellation, but whether there are other forms of constellations. And sometimes you will also see that integration of Earth observation as well as PNT combining together in certain number of constellations and number of satellites are really going to increase. So this is going to be the special challenge and applications. And equally important is to look at how we can manage this debris. I think debris are a reality. People discuss how you can bring back the debris, some of the defunct satellites, and collect them, bring back, reprocess them, sometimes reprocess them at the space. All these are topic of discussion that are happening, but many of them don't have solutions right away. And it is mostly driven by the fact that it is not cost effective at this moment. But we should not shy away from creating technologies for collecting them, reprocessing them, refueling them, or even deorbiting them. And many companies world over are working on such technologies and capabilities. And in ISRO also we are working on similar technologies. And one of them is going to be launched in the next month. It is called the SpaceX. This mission is looking at how to dock with another satellite and connect a propulsive device so that we can deorbit some of the satellites. And we are also going to do a tethered capture experiment in this year itself. And this will launch a robotic arm from an upper stage and grab a satellite while it is moving and then collect it back so that we can do that process and operations. We are also looking at a servicer mission where we should be able to go and fuel a satellite which has just deprived of the last amount of fuel, and so that we can fire it thrusters once again, change its orbit or sometimes deorbit. So all these activities are started in our organization, where it's a very complex problem with the robotic arms, with respect to with the deployable antenna, LIDARs, AI tools, and complex control system. Only this type of activities can be done. And we are going to work in next 1 or 2 years on developing these technologies to help us to mitigate at least some of the dangerous objects out of the space. So this is a very important domain that we would like to work in the technology side. So let me conclude my talk at this moment and leave it for further discussions or questions. Thank you so much. If there are.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, yes. Yes, in fact, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, in fact, I'd like to let you all know that Dr. S. Somnath has agreed to take some questions from the audience. So let's see that active participation come from our members of the audience. Kindly raise your hand, sir. We'll quickly pass the mic. We'll have the mic right across here. So we'll get you the mic next for the second question. It's on, sir.
Hello. Good morning, sir. My question is to Honorable Somnath, sir, is that recently in September 18, the cabinet note gave access to the extended version of Gaganyaan mission and Chandrayaan 4 mission to in collaboration with Gaganyaan and Chandrayaan to extend it to the Venus orbiter mission.
Can we contain the questions within the subject that I have just presented, or I won't be answering any general questions.
So I'd like to ask about how space situation awareness play a role, and how Chandrayaan 4 that will gonna take place in Venus orbiter mission. Of course.
No, you can't rephrase the question. Thank you. Can we move out to the next question?
Sir, I believe you had a question, sir. Can you quickly pass the mic over here on the third row? Once again, I'm going to request our members of the audience to ensure your questions are with regard to the subject that was just discussed, the topic that was just discussed. Thank you.
Sir, I want to ask you two simple questions. One is that today when you're looking at space, as far as defense usage is concerned, we look at three aspects. One is the PNT, where the NAVIC is coming up. But we are also looking at how to use space for continuously monitoring an area of interest on Earth for defense usage. As you know that today the defense ecosystem is also having private vendors who are looking at using satellite. So in the LEO, if we have a constellation of satellites where continuously monitoring an area of interest on Earth and thereafter doing change management, how can ISRO help this ecosystem to get developed, or do you think we have within space and other agencies coming up the number of LEO satellites going there and giving us almost a revisit time that we look at for military purposes in terms of an area of interest where quickly change management
I understood the question. You are talking about increasing the revisit capability, and you need to have a faster refreshing of critical areas that need observation. I fully agree with you. It will come out of only increasing the number of spacecraft. The currently number of spacecraft that we are deployed for these activities are much lesser. So we should look at how to increase it. You talked about constellations, and it won't be just a constellation, because we need to look at this in various bands. We need to look at with the persistence vision through a geo, so that you can look at large areas in a medium resolution. And when you have some interest, then you need to look at another layer of satellites which will look at a little more coarser resolution or finer resolution. And when you have specific areas which are a much higher resolution. So we need a multi-layered approach to really look at a large area, because for our country we have a huge border, land border as well as the sea border. So we have lot of, maybe it's something like 8,000 kilometers to be seen, and satellites don't go like aircrafts. They move very fast over the orbits. So we need huge numbers. So we understand the problem, and in the coming days we are going to work with the government as well as private ecosystem to create this and then deploy it. And definitely this need is very, very felt. But then our ability to produce and launch them in a short span of time is a huge challenge. And we are addressing them through all these mechanisms that we have today. I am sure about the space sector reforms and opening up of this, allowing private companies to come in, really going to change the way we in our ability to produce large numbers and deploy them. Thank you.
With that, let's move on to the next question. Yes, sir. We've got a question here. We've got a hands raised there as well. Team, let's quickly pass the mics right ahead, or if anybody else already has a mic.
Good morning, sir. So my question is regarding the SBS Phase 3, sir. So in that, sir, other than the conventional surveillance of Earth, sir, are we looking at particularly in the GEO, sir?
I won't be able to answer those questions.
Right, sir.
We'll quickly move on to the next question. We've got a lot of hands raised. I want the team to quickly pass the mic. Really quick. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I can hear you. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Supply chain, the supplies that you use in your production, what percentage are India made, and what percentage come from other countries, such as China?
I got the question. I'll repeat the question for her. She asked how much of your product is made in India and how much is coming from China. So the answer is straight. For rockets, 95% is made in India and 5% comes from outside. The 5% are mostly electronic parts, and of course it is sourced world over. For spacecraft, almost 60% is done in India, 40% comes from outside. And this 40% again are electronic parts. So we realize that the dependence on high-end electronics is very high for spacecrafts, but not for rockets. Rockets, I know I can even go for 100% in India with the type of capability that we have today, but we still continue certain numbers. But then spacecrafts, this continued dependence is still there. But of course, the sources are international companies which are well known, and many of them need to have a very authentic supply chain. So definitely, all the sources are well known to us, and we characterize them, validate them to use. Of course, some of the sources are banned from usage, so we don't currently use them as well. Thank you.
Next question, or anyone else who quickly has a mic? All right, let's quickly pass the mic as well. Yes, sir. We have a question right behind. Yes, sir.
Sir, here.
Sir, right ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I'm Group Captain Rao from the Center for Air Power Studies. A very nice talk, sir. My question is on the effect of mega constellations on SSA. You brought out that there'll be a very high requirement of coordination that will be required. That is true. The existing geopolitical situation in the world with, one is so many operators spread across the world and a large number of constellations even from China and some from Russia. So having a very high level of inter-agency coordination is going to become a little far-fetched. So what is the possibility of having SSA being done by a global agency under the UN and not US providing SSA to the operators across the world?
Say US is providing because they have a heritage system. It has been created long back during the Star War period, and that continues to be the source of very important data today. US Spacecom provides that information today voluntarily to a huge amount of users across the world, but it's not a complete data set. You must understand it is only a partial data set. If you are to create your own observational capability, and if you want to see the problems which I mentioned, though I didn't go dwell into each of those problems can be seen only if you have your own observational capability. You cannot get from a coordinated observation or a global player. So you need to create, as a sovereign nation, you need to create your own capability if you have to protect your own assets.
We'll take one last question. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. Fascinating talk, great slides. I enjoyed it. I have actually 1.5 questions. One is building on what you said about supply chains. You haven't mentioned radars and optical stations. Are there any international projects to support ISRO effort? And the second question is a broader one. How do you see relations between SSA capabilities and also early warning capabilities and missile defense capabilities? Well, how is it organized in your company? Thanks.
Yeah, they both are in some way related, but they're not. They could be complementary. I won't say that you can create one system for both. That's not a real possibility. Because you need to dedicate for those observations on a 24/7 basis. And this need not be of that nature. Because it can have various other elements. And the type of detectability in that time and also tracking and prediction need to be much more faster in case of low-flying objects. Whereas for satellites, it is more predictable in terms of orbital nature. So the modeling and mathematics differ. So I will recommend that they have to be complementary, but it has to be separate.
Thank you, sir. In fact, I can see a lot of hands raised. I'm going to request you to please remain on the dais, sir. While I know a lot of people are eager to interact with you, however, due to paucity of time, we might have to call it a wrap to this round of interaction. But that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to please invite on stage the Vice Chief of the Army Staff, Lieutenant General N.S. Raja Subramani, to please come on stage, sir. PVSM, AVSM, SM, VSM. Sir, if I may please invite you to please do the honors of felicitating Dr. S. Somnath. So can we have both of you come together for a quick photo op? If I could just request both of you to please come together for a quick photo op. Ladies and gentlemen, we managed to gather the frameworks around the space situational awareness We got to understand the emerging tech and the emerging risks as well, but we also got to see how space situational awareness also plays a big role in terms of sustainability. Can we have a louder round of applause one more time to thank Dr. S. Somnath? Thank you once again, sir, for your valuable presence. With that, ladies and gentlemen, let's now move ahead to another special address, and this is all about shaping the global agenda, India's multilateral mandate. This morning, we have the presence of Ambassador Ruchira Kamboj, former permanent representative of India to the UN. She's a distinguished Indian diplomat and has consistently broken new ground throughout her career. A top performer in the 1987 Indian Foreign Service batch, she also became the first woman from India to preside over the United Nations Security Council in December 2022. As India's permanent representative to the UN in New York until May 2024, she's also played a pivotal role in advancing India's global interests. Ambassador Kamboj has also served as India's first female ambassador to Bhutan, where she strengthened crucial bilateral ties, and as High Commissioner to South Africa, fostering relations with key African partner. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a huge round of applause. Please help me welcome on stage Ambassador Ruchira Kamboj.
Well, good morning, everybody. Distinguished guests and all members of this wonderful audience. Now, before I begin, I want to extend my sincere appreciation to our hosts. Events like these are not just opportunities for intellectual exchange. They are catalysts for shaping the future, spaces where ideas converge and resonate long after we've left the room. I thank Claus not only for inviting me, but for creating a platform where the urgency of our times meets a clarity of purpose. It is rare to find a forum that brings together such powerful voices, and we have just heard Chairman ISRO, capable not only of observing the world, but hopefully of reshaping it. Now, with that in mind, I will turn immediately to the topic at hand, shaping India's multilateral mandate, basically how India has shaped the discussion in the course of its United Nations journey. I will address 6 key themes. First and foremost, India's historical contribution to multilateralism. Then our leadership at the United Nations Security Council, which is really the cockpit of the UN system. Our strong stance on counter-terrorism, our unparalleled contributions to UN peacekeeping, and our advocacy for essential reforms in global governance structures such as the United Nations Security Council. And finally, I will highlight India's soft power, which has become a significant force in shaping global discourse. So first and foremost, let's start with some history. I think all of you are very familiar that India was a founding member of the United Nations in 1945. And from these early days, India has been a voice for the oppressed, for the marginalized, and for the voiceless. We took a principled stand against apartheid long before it was widely accepted, or should I say long before it was fashionable, and we led also the charge in the decolonization movement. Our diplomatic leadership during those times established a framework for India's engagement with the world. And what was that? It was rooted in justice, peace, and human dignity. Many of you would recall here that India was the very first country to bring apartheid to the agenda of the United Nations, and we persisted until the system was dismantled in 1992. The agenda item, treatment of India in the Union of South Africa, was the agenda item that we brought to the United Nations, which set the stage for India's larger involvement in the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. Then our role in the United Nations Special Decolonization Committee was very crucial. We brought the issue to the forefront in the United Nations, and who can forget those of us who are familiar with the United Nations, Resolution 1514 of the year 1960, the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples. And even today, at the United Nations, India is a member of the Special Decolonization Committee as we work to complete the unfinished business of decolonization. Now, you might ask me, what on earth is this unfinished business of decolonization? Well, let me inform you, there are yet 17 non-self-governing territories on the agenda of the United Nations, and that is a conversation that continues in New York. Now, the point I want to stress here, that India's approach to multilateralism has never, and I stress the word never, has never been about power politics. It has been about moral leadership and walking the talk. This remains unchanged till date. Our founding leaders recognized that for the global system to be sustainable, it must be inclusive and it must be just. And today, as we champion the cause of the global South, we do so with the same moral clarity that defined our early years. Now, my second point, let me turn very quickly to India's tenure at the United Nations Security Council. Well, we've been a member of the UN Security Council, which is the most powerful body in the United Nations, mandated for international peace and security. We've been a member of the United Nations Security Council 8 times, a testament to the trust that the international community places in us. And during our most recent term, which was very recent actually, 2021-22, when I also had the privilege to serve as the permanent representative and ambassador, India's leadership was marked by both vision and action to match that vision. At the very outset, Prime Minister Modi had set out a framework of 5 S's. Many of you would be very familiar with that. And what were these 5 S's? Samman, which is respect. Samvad, which is dialogue. Sahyog, which is cooperation. Shanti, which is peace. And Samriddhi, which is prosperity. Now, these principles did indeed guide India's engagement in the Security Council, and they reflect our belief that the international community must be built on mutual respect, on dialogue and cooperation to foster peace and prosperity for all. And again, I will stress the word all. So there were many memorable moments, if you ask me, when we were on the Security Council in this most recent tenure. But I think a couple of areas really stand out. The stand we took on counter-terrorism, on peacekeeping to make the terrain safer for our peacekeepers, quite simply those who keep the peace. There was a very focused discussion for the very first time in the UN Security Council on maritime security and cooperation. And of course, there was a huge focus, and I noticed that the speaker right before Chairman Isro also spoke about the UN Security Council. There was also a very focused discussion, several discussions, in fact, on reforming global governance structures, which you may please read as a reform of the United Nations Security Council. Now, very quickly, I will highlight 2-3 very important things that we did during this tenure. In August 2021, we facilitated the adoption of Resolution 2589, which aimed to ensure accountability for crimes committed against UN peacekeepers. Very important, I think you will agree with me, because as one of the largest troop contributing countries in UN history, having deployed over 250,000 peacekeepers since 1948 across almost 50 missions, India's commitment to UN peacekeeping runs very deep. This resolution, we felt, was a very major step in ensuring that those who harm peacekeepers are brought to justice. Now, also during our presidency, the second point I do want to highlight was that India, and as I've already mentioned that very quickly, India organized the first ever open debate on maritime security, chaired by the Prime Minister of India. Now, this is very notable, as the Prime Minister became the first Indian Prime Minister to preside over a United Nations Security Council open debate. Now, this debate highlighted the importance of international cooperation in countering piracy and transnational crime, emphasizing the need for a free, open, and inclusive maritime order. Now, 5 aspects were particularly important, which I want to highlight here. 1, free maritime trade. 2, peaceful settlement of maritime disputes. 3, combating maritime threats. 4, the conservation of the marine environment and resources. And 5, enhancing global partnerships in capacity building for maritime security, particularly for small and developing countries. Now, this debate really fits into India's larger maritime strategy, linking this to SAGAR, or Security and Growth for All in the region, and of course, the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, or EPOI. India's leadership, we saw this as an opportunity to promote the initiative and position ourselves as a leader in maritime governance and security, especially in the Indo-Pacific. Which brings me to my third point, which is also a very important pillar of India's strategy and India's projections at the United Nations, which is our leadership in counter-terrorism at the United Nations. Now, all of you here are very familiar with the fact that India has itself been a victim of terror, and who knows this better than us, how important it is to fight unitedly against this scourge and push terrorism back. So in December 2022, during our second presidency of the United Nations Security Council, India turned its focus to this very pressing issue. We led the adoption of a presidential statement on counter-terrorism, which called for enhanced global cooperation to prevent terrorist organizations from exploiting new and emerging technologies, such as cryptocurrencies and social media, to finance their activities. And if you ask me, this was very significant, also because we were presiding over the Council at a time, and in fact the world still is a very polarized and divided place. And to get a presidential statement adopted at this time was no mean feat. But we did manage to do that with the strength of our arguments and the commitment to the cause. And prior to that, I do want to highlight that in October 2022, prior to our presidency, we had achieved a historic first. We brought the entire 15-member Security Council down to New Delhi and adopted a declaration called the New Delhi Declaration on countering the misuse of technology by terrorist groups and strengthening cyber security. Now, I want to stress that this was indeed a very landmark arrangement, because the Security Council, as you all know, meets mostly in New York. Rare are the occasions when all 15 members and the Secretariat backing the Security Council traveled to countries outside New York. And this was the very first time that it was done in India, and perhaps 7 or 8 years after Spain had done something similar. Now, the adoption of the New Delhi Declaration, if you ask me what was the significance of the declaration, this was indeed a very significant diplomatic achievement for India, as a country, as I've mentioned, that has been a victim of multiple terrorist attacks. We have consistently called for stronger international counter-terrorism measures. And our role in hosting the event and leading the discussions reinforced our position as a key player in the global fight against terrorism. It also showcased our commitment to multilateralism, of course, and our efforts to shape the global counterterrorism agenda. Now, very quickly, I just want to summarize this in 2 words. You might ask me, what is our stand on counterterrorism? Well, zero tolerance to terror. There are no good, there are no bad terrorists. There is only terror. And the world must unite against that. My next point is about India's unmatched contributions to United Nations peacekeeping. Very quickly, all of you would recall that India has been associated with United Nations peacekeeping since the very inception of peacekeeping, since 1948. And what was that mission? That was when India sent unarmed military observers to a mission called UNSO, which was to monitor the ceasefire between the Arabs and the Israelis. And thereafter, I think a couple of other aspects that need to be borne in mind about India's contribution to peacekeeping is that we were again in 2007 the very first country to send an all-female contingent to Liberia. A transformative moment that inspired local women, as we are told, to join the police forces and empowered entire communities. In fact, when our peacekeepers left Liberia, the then president of the country, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, singled out the contribution of India's women peacekeepers. And I must also add here that this move by India inspired other countries to also consider gender-inclusive approaches to peacekeeping. So in many ways, perhaps you would agree with me that India was a pioneer here. But then this was not a mere flash in the pan. We followed that up in January 2023 when I was the ambassador to the UN with an all-female platoon to be deployed in Abyei, which is a disputed region, as many of you know, between North and South Sudan. Once again underscoring our commitment to gender equality in peacekeeping. The other point I would also like to highlight about our contribution to peacekeeping is that we have been associated, as I mentioned, with almost all United Nations peacekeeping missions. And in the 1960s, there was a memorable mission to Congo, ONUC, not MONUSCO, as it is known today, when India had also provided both troops and air support when Indian Air Force personnel manned United Nations aircrafts. And finally, of course, you will agree with me that nothing comes without a cost, neither does United Nations peacekeeping. India has lost the maximum, regrettably has lost the maximum number of soldiers amongst United Nations peacekeepers, 177 to date. And what are we doing about it? Trust me, we are not being idle. Last year, I introduced a resolution in the United Nations General Assembly, moved by India, but guess what? Supported by 189 member countries, which is virtually the entire membership of the United Nations, 190 countries supporting a resolution on the erection of a peacekeeping memorial wall. There already exists one, a tiny wall in the gardens of the United Nations. The difference with this one will be that this will have the names of all soldiers etched on the wall, a fitting tribute to a task that is so noble. And this resolution, I will highlight to you as we are talking about India's global influence, secured the maximum number of co-sponsors of any United Nations resolution in the history of the United Nations, surpassing the resolution on Nelson Mandela Day, and also our very own resolution on International Yoga Day. So I would conclude this segment by saying that Indian peacekeepers are more than just soldiers. They are actually ambassadors of hope, resilience, and peace. And it's not just the scale, the numbers, but the diversity of India's peacekeeping efforts, making it a key player in maintaining international peace and security. Now, the next segment, my next point, will be dedicated to a very important aspect of the United Nations system, which is a reform of the governance structures, a reform specifically of the United Nations Security Council. Now, many of you are familiar with the facts that the UN was formed in 1945 on the debris, to borrow a space term, on the debris of the League of Nations, and mandated to maintain international peace and security. And at that time, the United Nations had simply 51 members. And perhaps it made sense to have 5 permanent members at that time. But today, what is the membership of the United Nations? 193. So the membership has quadrupled. And what about the Security Council? It has remained frozen in time, with just 5 permanent members calling the shots, overriding the will, very often, as you will see in the 2 current conflicts of Gaza and Ukraine, overriding the will of 188 member states. How does that even work? Clearly it doesn't. And therefore, India has been calling for an urgent reform of the Security Council, to expand it, to increase the presence of both permanent and non-permanent members, to bring a greater majority of members from the unrepresented and underrepresented regions of the world, basically the global south. There is a very strong case for Africa, for instance, to be on the Security Council. 70% of the agenda of the Council relates to Africa. Africa doesn't have a presence in the Security Council on a permanent basis. What about Brazil, which is another emerging power? And most importantly, from an Indian perspective, what about India? India has all impeccable credentials to be a member of the United Nations Security Council. But this has not happened till date. But lest anyone in this room feel that India is only obsessed about expanding its presence in the Security Council as a permanent member, our stand is one of comprehensive reform, not just an expansion in the numbers of those who are in the Security Council, but a reform in the working methods of the Council to make these more transparent. They are pretty opaque now, and that is also an understatement. So we support a more democratic and transparent Council, enhancing the role of elected members, improving consultation with other UN member states, and making decision-making more accountable. Now, if you ask me where are we on this, this is often highlighted in various discussions and also in the media. Well, it's yet a work in progress. It is a journey that is continuing. It's a complex process, and I think I can unhesitatingly state that it is the most complex process in the United Nations system. But one thing is very clear to me, that the UN as it stands today, and to give you a slight analogy, is like a bridge built for the past, but struggling to bear the weight of modern challenges. And what are the modern challenges? Terrorism, climate change, pandemics, etc., etc. We must either repair this bridge or risk its collapse as nations increasingly turn to other pathways for cooperation. And all of you have been watching the news recently. Only yesterday, I think, we were focused on the most recent meeting of the BRICS, an expanded BRICS now with 10 members and with 13 more partner countries introduced. So unless the United Nations adapts itself and becomes modern and more democratic and brings a diversity of voices to the table, it risks becoming completely outdated. Simply put, the future of global peace demands a council that reflects today's world, not yesterday's power structures. And there's that famous quotation by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres when he says that you cannot build a world for your grandchildren based off a system that was built for your grandparents. I rest my case there. Which now brings me to another segment that I wish to focus upon, India's stand on recent conflicts, both in Ukraine and Gaza. Now, all of you know that as far as Ukraine is concerned, India's stand has been very clear, very consistent, and very principled also. And we've walked the talk also in the process. We have stated from the very outset that we are for peace, dialogue, and diplomacy. We have not simply spoken, we have also acted on these words. We have sent humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, which has been caught in the middle of this conflict. We have been very actively stating that we are ready to support any peaceful conclusion of this conflict, and we believe that dialogue and diplomacy are the only pathways to stability. Now, similarly on Gaza, India condemned the terror attack of October 7. And for all of you who are sitting here, and based on what I've already said, that shouldn't come as a surprise. India has been a victim of terror. We are against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. And so, therefore, we condemned the terror attack. But at the same time, we were equally concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. And I remember speaking from the podium of the General Assembly on many occasions saying that the humanitarian situation was simply unacceptable. And we again walked the talk. We sent humanitarian assistance to Gaza. In fact, in recent years, India has increased its humanitarian contribution to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in the Middle East. So we have walked the talk, and at the same time, we have supported a two-state solution, advocating for peaceful coexistence between Israel and Palestine. So this has been our position on both these conflicts, and sometimes I get some feedback that, India's position is not very clear. India is being somewhat non-aligned on this issue. It cannot afford to do that, a country like India. Well, let me tell you something that all of us feel pretty strongly about. We have said very clearly that we are on the side of peace, dialogue, and diplomacy, and that peace is also a side, and we intend to stand firmly there. Most recently, the Prime Minister of India has visited both Ukraine and Russia and has reiterated this. He had said so in the past also. This is not an era of war, highlighting the fact that the focus instead should be on peace, progress, prosperity, and development. And this statement resonates very deeply in our approach to both conflicts, Ukraine and Gaza. I will quote a very recent statement by the Prime Minister of India when he said, "We believe that problems should be resolved only through peaceful means. India is ready to offer its full support and cooperation alongside our friendly nations to restore peace." So I think to all those skeptics in the room, if there are any, let me just reiterate that India's stand has been very clear, very consistent, very principled, where we have also walked the talk. Which brings me to my next point. India has also manifested its soft power in a multilateral sitting. Very quickly, all of you know about International Yoga Day, so I will not spend too much time on that, but I will say that last year, in June 2023, 21st June, of course, the Prime Minister of India was at the United Nations in New York, and the venue was overflowing and full. I will emphasize this. Over 3,000 people were packed in the north lawns of the United Nations, and that lawn can't take any more people. And the event was at 7 a.m. in the morning, which means that people would have started to come to the venue because there was very tight security, as you can imagine, and get up as early as 4 a.m. in the morning. Only a country such as India, I assure you, can pull off such an event. And what did we do in the process? We set a Guinness World Record. Some of you might know that. The maximum number of nationalities in any yoga session across the world was set on 21st June 2023, with over 135 countries present at senior-most and top levels. So how about that? This was a practical manifestation of India's leadership in promoting holistic well-being. But not just yoga. I remember when the Indian mission landed in the moon last year, we convened a press conference at the United Nations, and we had the international media, and it was a moment of great pride and joy when we spoke about India's achievements in space, which the world is acknowledging. The world is noticing, and the world is acknowledging. Also, the concept of one humanity, one family, I think, has had some resonance in recent years. And I think nobody can forget that in the height of the COVID pandemic, India was the one country that, free of charge, we did not monetize that opportunity, extended a helping hand to many countries across the globe when many others held back. In fact, I had many ambassadors come across and tell me that, it was from your country that we got the first doses of vaccine. And we will never forget that. What do you call that but altruism of the highest kind? And of course, by the way, during that time also we provided 2 lakh doses of COVID-19 vaccines to United Nations peacekeepers, absolutely free of cost. There have been many other instances when India has extended a helping hand, the earthquake in Turkey, when we were one of the earliest to cite a very recent example. All of this exemplifies our commitment to helping those in need. We just don't speak about global solidarity. That is my point. We act on it. Then, in the domain of sustainable living, India has actively campaigned a project called Mission Life, which is a new lifestyle for the environment, aimed at combating climate change by encouraging sustainable living. And I remember at the UN there was a huge resonance for this initiative that we had brought to the table last year. And then in 2023, last year, we also led the declaration of the International Year of Millets, a move aimed at promoting food security and sustainable agriculture globally. We presented the case of millets, which are climate resilient crops, and which represent India's commitment to sustainable food systems. So all of these initiatives and much more showcase India's soft power and influence of ideas which is very important, that foster global well-being and shared prosperity. Now, I don't, as I'm coming to the end of my presentation, don't mean to make this sound all very rosy. Now, during our tenure in the Security Council and in our broader international engagement, India has stood firm and unflinching in the face of shared threats to humanity, like terrorism, like climate change, like pandemics, etc. And when we speak, we are very conscious of the fact that we speak not just for 1.4 billion Indians, but for the entire global South, those whose voices are often sidelined in global conversations. We recognize that our role is to stand up for the marginalized and to make their concerns heard. And there have been times when we have stood alone, but we have done so proudly. The alternative, what was the alternative? The alternative was to compromise on the core principles that define us, and that was never an option. India has always prioritized standing on the right side of history, defending those principles of justice, of equality and peace that shape our identity and indeed our global presence. We also made it a priority to spotlight issues that had been ignored for too long, issues that matter deeply to us and to much of the world. Our aim has been to shift the global agenda and bring attention to the real pressing challenges facing developing nations. Because after all, we are from the global South and indeed one of the leading voices of the global South. And here I will tell you, let us not forget that while membership of the African Union to the G20 had been a subject of discussion for years. After all, India was not the first country to bring this agenda to the table, but it was during India's presidency last year that we brought this aspiration to fruition. In doing so, we demonstrated that India is not only a voice for itself, but also an advocate for others, walking the talk on the concerns of the marginalized. Which brings me to my conclusion. I think many of you would agree with me that we stand at a very important moment in history and at a time when multilateralism is facing significant challenges. Indeed, in the face of resurgent nationalism, many would even argue that multilateralism is in decline. So what is India's multilateral mandate at such a time? I would say not merely to participate, but, through example, to lead the global system into the future, whether in peacekeeping, in counterterrorism, climate action, development for the global South, or UN reform. India's contributions are influencing the way the world addresses its most pressing challenges. And what is our message to the world? If I were to summarize this, I would say, in unity, there is strength. In dialogue, there is progress. And in cooperation, there is peace. We are aligned with peace and committed to fostering it globally. Now, if you ask me, one of the central issues facing the United Nations, how do we make this more credible? How do we make this more relevant? How do we make this more fit for purpose? How do we create a UN 2.0? And I would say, there are many aspects, of course, that need reform, but as I've already highlighted, one of the key issues is a reform of the United Nations Security Council. As I said, the very cockpit of the United Nations system. Without transforming this outdated structure, any attempt at UN reform will be incomplete and ineffective. The world has changed dramatically since the UN's founding, yet power remains concentrated in the hands of a few. To stay relevant, the UN must break free from this outdated model and embrace a structure that reflects today's changing global power dynamics. Real change is impossible without this overhaul, and the future credibility of the United Nations, I would say, depends on this. Reform, therefore, is not just overdue, it is a pressing necessity. And importantly, India is ready to be a part of that transformation, not to dominate, but to uplift. As a friend and as a helping hand, we stand ready to guide, to be part of, and to contribute to the international community and towards a more just and equitable world order. I do believe that the future belongs to those who believe in building bridges, not walls. And let me end with a quote from Prime Minister Modi. The world is changing, and India is ready to shape that change as a trusted partner for peace, justice, and prosperity. Thank you.
I just request you to be on stage. Firstly, thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. And I can safely say this on behalf of my members of the audience that we deeply connected with your poignant and your spirited thoughts that you've shared, be it around global solidarity, be it around India's initiatives. Can we have a huge round of applause one more time, ladies and gentlemen? And with that, once again, if I may please invite Vice Chief of the Army Staff, Lieutenant General N.S. Raja Subramani, PVSM, AVSM, SM, VSM. So if I may please invite you to please felicitate Ambassador Kamboj for her beautiful and for her spirited thoughts that she has shared with us. And in some way, these thoughts are truly setting the tone for what India is to be. Thank you once again, ma'am. Thank you once again, sir. We'll just have a quick photo op as well. Ladies and gentlemen, on that insightful note and on that inspiring note, we're now about to break for tea. And this is where I'd like to firstly request you to please be seated while our guests also make move for the tea break. But thank you once again, Dr. Somnath. Thank you once again, Ambassador Kamboj. Thank you very much for joining us this morning at the Chanakya Defence Dialogue 2024. And ladies and gentlemen, let me inform you that the scheduled break for tea will be about 15 minutes. So I'd like to request you to please enjoy the tea and the coffee. But I'm going to urge all of you to please be back inside the hall as we're about to get up for our very interesting session coming your way exactly at 11 a.m. So I request you all to please be back by 10:55 a.m. Well, let's try to do that if it's possible, but please do not forget to enjoy your cup of tea and coffee. Thank you so much again.